Welcome to the Common Bridge. We have a great topic with a great expert today, Dan Dodson, the Chief Executive Officer of Fortified Health Security. I'd also like to start this podcast off by thanking the many listeners to the podcast, now over 750,000 downloads, 750,000 and rising fast. Thank you very much. For those of you that have yet to subscribe, please do so on Apple, Amazon, Buzzsprout, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or most other places you get your podcast, or of course on YouTube TV, and register for free at richardhelppie.com because we've got some really good things coming. So let me introduce our guest today, and his entire bio will be up on our website, richardhelppie.com. Dan L. Dodson is the Chief Executive Officer of Fortified Health Security. Fortified is a recognized leader in cybersecurity, focusing on protecting patient data and reducing risk in the healthcare industry. Again, remember, healthcare industry is the largest part of our economy, and it's important to all of us. A lot of interaction with data. Dan, and he's backed by a great team of cybersecurity consultants, produced an industry-leading report called the Horizon Report. This examines the state of cybersecurity in healthcare. It's very comprehensive, semi-annually. It's free for all industry stakeholders, and I think it just shows Dan's commitment to the industry. Dan Dodson is a featured media source on many topics, including security's best practices, data privacy strategies, risk management, and mitigation. He also welcomes any opportunity to discuss the latest findings in the Horizon Report, along with the ever-growing security challenges being faced in a post-COVID-19 world. Dan's everywhere. He's been in Security Magazine, Associated Press, Medical Economics, Health IT Security, Med City News, and Cybersecurity Drive. He's not a newbie at this. He's been leading business units for healthcare consultant Santa Rosa Consulting as a vice president. Executive Vice President. He's been Global Healthcare Strategy Lead for Dell Services, where he was responsible for the strategy, the business planning, and the merger and acquisition initiatives for that healthcare business unit. He's led strategic efforts for other healthcare and health insurance organizations, including the Covenant Health System and the Parker Group. Dan was featured by Becker's Hospital Review, again, a leading authority in healthcare, as a rising healthcare leader under 40 just in 2018, and he has served on the Southern Methodist University Cybersecurity Advisory Board. So we're very fortunate that Dan's agreed to spend a few minutes with us today to talk about cybersecurity. Dan, welcome, and I hope everybody will pay attention as you introduce the topic. We're going to try to go from A to Z in 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, Rich, thank you so much for that introduction, and super happy to be here and look forward to the conversations this morning.
Great. So today we're going to talk about cyber attacks and countermeasures. Cybersecurity. What is it? How does it work? What makes people want to engage in cybercrime? Where does it come from? How to prevent it, and how to guard against becoming a victim. Dan, our audience likes to know a little bit about our guests. So can you tell us, where did you spend your early days?
Yeah, thanks, Rich, for sure. So I've always been intrigued with healthcare. From a little boy, my neighbor started and exited a medical billing organization. So I saw him build this business on the administrative side of healthcare, was a mentor for me then and still is today. And so that led me on a journey to pursue the support of healthcare, and I ended up in healthcare IT. Started at Texas Tech University, have an MBA in health organization management, and really been in healthcare IT since it had the boon in the backs of aura, right? So there was all this money coming into healthcare to digitize it. I helped drive initiatives in the early days at Pro Systems, which led to Dell Services, as you kind of outlined in the intro, and then really focused a lot on the EHR, working with Santa Rosa, some other organizations. And then what I found
EHR is the electronic health record.
Yes, thank you, Rich.
We're becoming more familiar with.
Yes, sir, the electronic health record. And what I found was on the backs of this boon in digitization, there wasn't this focus on security, right? And it was an infrastructure issue. So the networks that these, electronic health records were sitting on sometimes were legacy and cobbled together through the consolidation of health systems, which has been a trend in healthcare. And so there were pockets of vulnerabilities, but now we had all this rich data. And so I got intrigued with the cybersecurity elements and have been focused in that for the last 5+ years. And we at Fortified Health Security have built a really nice business helping predominantly health systems secure patient information and the good guys on the opposite end of cyber attacks.
So when the bad guys are trying to get in, you've got layers of technology and human beings that try to keep them out.
Yeah, that's right, Rich. I mean, I think the dynamics in cybersecurity is really people, process, and technology. And so, what a lot of people hear about are the advances of technology, and that's great. But in order to actually let that technology reduce risk and protect patients, you have to have experts and process around that technology to actually drive the value. And so that's really what we focus on, is making sure that that layered technology stack, so to speak, is functioning correctly to actually thwart off these bad actors.
And look, the public has heard a lot about cyber attacks, and we're told to protect our passwords. We're told to use encryption, guard our phones, keep a close eye on our bank records, use dual authentication. That means you get a text after you sign on and say, "Is this really you?" And yet we're still told perhaps our information is out in some place called the dark web. We've seen the shutdown of the Colonial Pipeline due to a ransomware attack, and I hope we get into that a little bit today. And look, we're in an interconnected world. A photo that someone takes right now can literally be around the world in the blink of an eye, and that includes our personal financial information. That can be whisked away as well. And the world's getting more interconnected. There's more devices on the web. It's the Internet of Things. And now we hear about artificial intelligence programs that are just searching out our vulnerabilities all the time. It's pretty frightening, frankly. Um, so today, a little let's just dive into cybercrime, cybersecurity, and what the future holds. And I know we're going to get some education and maybe some policy ideas and maybe some personal things that each of us can do. So Dan, is there a simple definition for cybercrime or cyber attack? This, like when we throw those words out, what do we mean?
Yeah, I would say, simply put, Rich, it's a coordinated effort to damage or destroy electronic information, right? And once you do that, you can exploit it in multiple different ways, and we could talk about those ways that you can exploit it. But very simply, it's trying to damage or destroy sensitive information.
And so cybersecurity is kind of the countermeasure to that, or is it a better definition than that?
Yeah, precisely, Rich. I mean, think of it as the good guys, right? So the cyber security initiatives, programs, capital deployment within businesses, the personal things we can do, those are countermeasures, if you will, to protect that information. And we try to do that through a layered approach. But that's right.
Now, what are some of the types of cyber attacks? And bearing in mind that our audience is not healthcare or technology, or certainly not cybersecurity experts. But we've heard about ransomware, denial of service, phishing. Is there a kind of a compendium of the types of cyber attacks that we're experiencing?
Yeah, I think the most common cyber attacks are going to be what's labeled as ransomware, and technically what that is, simply put, Rich, is a bad actor has gotten into your environment and is holding your data for ransom, and if you pay the ransom, they'll unlock the data. Conceptually, that's how it's supposed to work. But the actual exploit is what's called malware, right? Which is a virus in the old days, and so it's actually the malware that enables the ransomware, right? And so when we think about the psyche of these bad actors, majority of the time they're out for monetary gain. They want your money, right? And so they're going to they figured out that ransom is a great way to get money, right? Versus just simply selling it on the dark web. Let me actually hold the business or the person hostage so that they're more likely to pay.
So if I understand, so there's a piece of malware, they penetrate the network, they put it on someone's network, and then the business, all of a sudden their computers don't work, and they're told you've got to pay ransom, usually in some kind of digital currency, and then they'll give you the key to turn it back on. Otherwise, we're going to just destroy it.
Right. And so you as a business are backed into a position of either restoring from backups that you have, simply put, other copies of your infrastructure and your applications that you might have as part of your IT strategy, or pay the ransom to get the key. Now, what's often not talked about as much is once you receive the key, you still have to cleanse all of your machines. You have to make sure that they're not in your environment anymore. It's extraordinarily costly. And what's really interesting from a timing perspective, Rich, it kind of talks about the psyche of these criminals, is look at what happened in Ireland. So the health system gets locked out, right? The national health system gets locked out. The bad guys hold it ransom, and then they say, wait a minute, we didn't really want to disrupt care, but we are. So we're going to give you the key for free so that you can begin the repair process. And so the layman might think, oh, I put the key in, boom, I'm back up, and I can use my electronic health record. It's not that simple, right? But I am still holding your data. So I'm going to let you go back to business and protect communities because I'm not that bad. But if you want your data not to be exposed, you still got to pay me. And so that's a great way to think about the psyche of these bad actors, and that's the driving force is the monetary gain.
So they've got like two ways to illicitly prosper. One is that the target victim here pays a ransom, and the second way is, hey, they've got my social security number, they've got my credit card number, they've got all my insurance information. They, they may have sensitive data that people wouldn't want out. Um, about their, medical care, particularly mental health case and that type of thing. And that's maybe why I know I've gotten notices before. People say, hey, you've got an account with us and we've been breached, so we're going to buy you a security service. So they've got multiple ways to make money off this.
Yeah, absolutely, Rich. And you hear sometimes it's been covered by lots of national news lately around the cost of a healthcare breach, to the organization that is ransomed or that is attacked or exploited. But on the human and the personal side, if your banking information gets compromised, as you just talked about, you change your password, you change your account, you can do that. Well, healthcare in the US is primarily driven by your social security number, right? And so part of the reason it's valuable is because they can monetize it and it's not easily changed, right? You can't change it. That's number one. Number two is, Rich, the data set, it becomes more valuable every day as individuals in that data set become eligible for Medicare and Medicaid. I can fraudulently bill. So there's just like so many avenues for them to exploit the medical information and then sell it, obviously,
And they've got your cell phone number,
cell
which
phone,
ties into
social.
lots of things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Dan, is the objective of these cyber criminals different if the target's a nation? I know there's been talk of national security issues. If it's a, JP Morgan Chase or a big business, or if the target's an individual. I mean, I understand healthcare with all that rich data, but, how risky is it right now for our nation that, bad actors, foreign actors, or crime networks can actually maybe disrupt our ability to respond to a military threat?
Rich, I think that in second half of 20, and I talked a lot about this, there was a call to arms as I think about it in healthcare, primarily because we're seeing massive disruption to care in our communities, right? So ultimately, when we think about cybersecurity, we typically think about like confidentiality, integrity, and availability, CIA. In healthcare, it's all about availability. We have to be able to serve the patients in our community. And what we started to see was these massive disruptions on the ability to deliver care. When I talk to hospitals and they go down, their system goes down, they've been digitized for 15 years. They don't know how to work on paper. They don't know how to operate like that. We've been digitized now. And so I can't deliver care. I have to divert care. Those are big disruptions. And so I think there's a huge human element to it that's unique to healthcare that you may not see in financial services. Certainly don't want to lose money, obviously. But healthcare, the stakes are high. And then you mentioned on the intro, Colonial Pipeline. I mean, this is an infrastructure issue, Rich. And the question is, how do we put policies in place to help fight
it? Exactly. And Dan, any idea, any way to quantify this? Like, how big of an issue is the cybercrime and cyber attacks? Does anybody say, hey, there's 10 a day, or 100 a day, or a million a day? Any way to put a number on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different statistics I'd share, Rich. So one is that there was a study done by Checkpoint, I believe, which is a which is a cybersecurity company, that said 1 in 39 health systems have had some type of ransomware activity in their environment. We think that number may actually be greater, candidly. When you think about reportable successful attacks or breaches, as they're called, in healthcare, that's a reportable event. So to the government. So if you have more than 500 records exposed, you must report it. In the first 5 months of this year, 255 organizations have been compromised, greater than 500.
Wow.
And
I know that healthcare was not the first target. The first target really was our national security, and then it was, banks and financial institutions. So these bad actors are really honing their trade elsewhere before they come, right at all of us in healthcare. And so that kind of what's being done in the area of cybersecurity. If we think about that, like, what is the federal government doing to protect, our missile systems and our social security systems, and and then what are businesses doing? And I know that the bad actors are using artificial intelligence, where the computers are learning about the computers. What about the countermeasures? And is there any chance that maybe our national security services protect businesses and ultimately healthcare and ultimately consumers? What's going on the protection side?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of room for improvement, Rich. And I think that at the second half of 20 in the Trump administration and into the Biden administration, they are starting to take cybersecurity a lot more serious. I'm by no stretch a policy expert. There was some executive orders that Trump pushed through at the end. There's some that Biden's pushed through. There's this notion that the government's going to go to a zero trust model, which is a long, complicated technical journey to make sure that the sources that are talking are known. I'll leave it there, simply put. But that's a long, multi-year journey that's expensive. I think the government has been focused certainly on the infrastructure that they have for the FBI, the CIA, the counterterrorism things that they do, et cetera. They were the creators of the ability to navigate in the dark web. Folks think about the dark web. So, there's kind of, like, simply put, kind of three layers to the internet, if you will. You all see kind of surface layer, which is you go to Google and go to a different source and it pops up. That's fine. And then there's kind of like the deep web, which is, hey, I've got to log in. This is like where your banking information is. It's protected. It's encrypted. And you have the dark web. And the dark web was designed in the 70s for individuals and agencies in the government to navigate without being tracked. Again, simply put. And so bad actors have used the ability of the dark web to navigate without being traced. And so there's good to that, and then there's bad to that. And so what we hear about is the bad, but there is some good. And so I think the government's done and has some success stories, Rich, in working on countermeasures in the dark web to stop some of this exploitation. But there's certainly ways to go. I think in healthcare, what is complicated for us is, we work with hundreds of health systems of all sizes, community hospitals, large IDNs, and everybody's at a different point in their cybersecurity journey. So everybody needs something different, Rich. And so how do you write a policy or deploy capital at a federal level when literally everybody needs something different? They're all at a different place. And I'm sure that transcends other industries as well. And so that becomes the regulatory, challenge when it thinks about actually executing and deploying capital to, create the countermeasures that we need.
Well, I like the sounds of no trust environment, and I like the fact that our federal government is leading that, because if we can get those protocols and national standards right, then maybe we have a chance. And I'm sure there'll be a counter strike to that countermeasure. And I wouldn't imagine there's any way to know who's winning these days. But yeah, I know. Look, I've been in your security operations center, and you had some technology that was actually showing threats, like where they were originating from, and it just lit up the screen. Just they were coming from Eastern Europe and from South America and every place else.
Yeah, you're right. And the interesting thing, Rich, is the threat landscape. It's when I talk to friends and people that aren't in cybersecurity, it's like, oh, I have this kind of vision of a person in a hoodie, like trying to hack away at trying to get into your data. And yes, that exists and that's a real threat. But the big threat are these nation state actors with thousands of people, coordinated efforts. And you talked about AI and ML. And what we're
Whether
seeing with
AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning. Okay,
machine learning, yeah, thank you, Rich.
right.
Which again, simply put, allows a known vulnerability to be exploited faster, right? So basically, what happens in the software world is there are glitches or vulnerabilities to software, meaning they could be exploited. And when a reputable, and they all do it, software company recognizes this, they tell people about it so you can fix it. And so typically, what you saw was, software company X says, hey, this is a vulnerability. Everybody that's running that software patches that vulnerability. And now the bad actors can't exploit that and get your information.
Good.
Well, what's happened with artificial intelligence and machine learning is the time from known vulnerability to exploit has shortened. So they're moving faster. So you have more individuals sponsored by nation states moving faster. And so the countermeasure to that is the good guys are using machine learning and AI to put countermeasures in place so that we can kind of, punch and punch back and try to stay ahead of each other.
It's like the shootout at the OK Corral being played out in cyberspace in a massive game of spy versus spy in cyberspace. Um,
Absolutely.
um, just amazing. And if we keep the analogy going, it was like, hey, we know where the hideout of the bad guys are. We're going to go raid them, right? From the Old West to the mobsters in Chicago to modern day criminals. Um, is it hard to find the culprits that are launching these cyber attacks? I mean, I've seen your technology saying it's coming from, and I'm not going to name any countries, but particular regions. Can it be known any more than that? Like it's that guy in that house, or
So here's the challenge, Rich. So we can track where it's coming from. We don't know where it originated, right? Because it can originate somewhere else and bounce around this dark web and then come from country X. But it's like, I don't know if that's where it originated. And then now there are the government and you've heard about these groups or cells, if you were, that are caught, right? And so it's a confidence level that they believe that this was this set of bad actors that did this. But to say that we know that it was this person in this location, I mean, it's almost impossible to pinpoint it precisely.
yeah, I was talking to a fellow that his job with the Department of Homeland Security was crimes against children, and there was a ring operating in Korea, South Korea, and these people that indulge in that horrible crime, they would subscribe using a digital currency like a Bitcoin, and that, but the Bitcoin ended up, it had to go into a bank eventually, into the local currency, and they intercepted that. That let them back up to the server. That let them find who was doing it, and it got them all their subscribers. And this really sick part about this, but also good news for the good guys, is that there was a price for people to view this child pornography, and there was another price if you wanted to contribute, which meant they were perpetuating acts, and they were able. Some guy sitting in Peoria, Illinois, or Tucumcari, New Mexico, thinking he's indulging this, gets a knock on his door because of the great cyber sleuthing that goes on. So we just,
Yeah,
and I can't imagine the cost of that. And I hope that the infrastructure bill, which we've covered a couple times now with Dr. Rick Geddes, put some money behind that.
yeah. I mean, there are. I'm glad you mentioned that, Rich. There are thousands of threats every day that are successfully blocked or diverted by cybersecurity organizations, by businesses themselves. We always hear about the ones that are unsuccessful, but there are countermeasures that are working. There are organizations that are deploying people and technology to thwart off these bad actors. And so it's not all negative. There is some positive successes as you talk about there.
So Dan, in addition to the zero trust, which sounds like a pretty good policy to me, is there any national or perhaps international policies that might be effective? And if this is part and parcel of the question, it seems it would make sense that there's got to be coordination amongst nations and amongst businesses if this is going to work. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that's on the horizon or that you recommend that we ought to be doing?
So one thing is, and I think we've actually made strides in this area, Rich, is to share information. The bad guys are sharing information. They are talking about successful exploits. And what we're starting to see is the good guys share information, right? So in my world, there's an information sharing organization called the Health ISAC, right? There's also other for financial services, and it's an information sharing collaborative. And so those health systems and healthcare organizations can subscribe to that. Fortified works with them as well to share information so that we can learn from each other, right? So I think there's been progress in there. There's certainly more progress to be made. And I think the veil of embarrassment and concern of retaliation from the government is starting to subside. So we see a lot more engagement with the FBI when we have a bad event. That's all positive. We've got to share more information. I think that the coordination between different countries becomes extraordinarily challenging given the political landscape across the world,
Yes.
right? And you can use your imagination to think through where a lot of these threats are originating. Those are the same countries and regions where we have multi-layered issues from a political perspective that we've got to think through. But where I do think there's opportunity, especially in the world I live in, is funding, right? I mean, we have enterprise cybersecurity issues in an S&B budget, and I don't mean a community hospital. I'm talking about even the big boys. I mean, we're on grocery stores with
Small
margins.
and medium size. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and we had all this financial incentive from the government to digitize healthcare, right? ARA and high tech and all these policies, which were successful. And look, there's a lot of debate about whether or not care is more coordinated now or not. There's pockets of that. That's kind of a separate debate. But where's the equal funding and incentive to secure that data? We haven't seen it,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Exactly. Like we've gone to a digital world, and I think we've talked about like what the national, international policies might be, and I like this notion that says, hey, I spotted a bad thing from a bad place and tell everybody. But I also hear what you're saying is that if that bad actor is a state, a state sponsored group, they can say they've spotted something and make people do things that maybe open up more vulnerabilities. So I just hope that we can get our best and brightest on this. This is why we need great math education. We need great computer science education. And we need to fund those at our universities, our high schools, and keep those people in the country to continue to better this. Um, Dan, what about individuals? I mean, how do we do our part? I know like people tell you something as easy as be careful what you click, but if you were going to look at the listeners to the Common Bridge and the viewers of the Common Bridge, and you'd say, "Here's what you need to do today," what would you tell them?
Yeah, I would tell everybody to first and foremost understand the most vulnerable population, right? Which is the elderly population. And so I'll tell you a story very quickly, Rich. So, back in the day, my wife, my mother-in-law, mother, got exploited through the mail. So I walk in her house and she's got all these, mails to like donate to things. And she's giving $5 here and $10 here, and that was kind of a common exploit, in the 90s, 2000s, right? Like let's mail out a bunch of stuff and try to get some money and checks. What that looks like today, and this is a story I heard last week, was an elderly woman got spoofed, which means tricked, that Amazon needed her account to return something. And so she clicked the link, she gave the $31 because she knew that she had bought something from Amazon. It looked just like Amazon. Through that malware, they got access to her bank account and transferred $300,000 out of her account, which was her entire life savings. And they tricked her to initiate the trade. So first and foremost, folks that grew up in this digital era, they would raise questions. They would check their Amazon account. They would match the dollars. I didn't return that, but we got to make sure that the most vulnerable understand that these spoofing activities are real, because that's where they're targeting these individuals, because they're the most susceptible. Cyber criminals are lazy, Rich. They're going to go to the most vulnerable and the easiest, right? So that would be the first thing. Is I'm very diligent about that. And then for everyone, I would say, it's said a lot, but lots of people don't do it. Don't have the same password for everything. Change your passwords often. In almost everywhere you could bank, all your social medias, enable the multi-factor authentication. You talked about that. Get the text and the email. Those are things that are extraordinarily important. And I would encourage everybody to do that. And then the last thing is have some common sense about if something's not right, because we all grew up with the internet where it was like, oh, the Russian prince or princess calls you and is going to give you, $6 million. Well, that doesn't work anymore. Okay. So it's all these small kind of things that look very close to where you actually and how you actually live your life. Right. And so if you haven't talked to this organization, or you haven't bought anything there lately, or it doesn't seem right, it's probably not. Right. So have this common sense about and perspective about what's being, emailed to you.
Yeah, and let me just pile on there in a couple ways too that people should understand if you didn't initiate something to your bank or to PayPal or to Amazon or to your healthcare provider or the Social Security Administration, you're not getting something back. They don't do it that way. And I just want to amplify, Dan, the point you made about don't use the same password, because the username and password that you've got on your bank account, the bad guys have that. And what they do is they just try it on millions of websites to see if it'll open any other doors. So all of your sign-ons and all of your passwords need to be unique. And there's software that can do that. Dan, this has really been insightful. I think you brought to life a lot of what is a very kind of opaque and esoteric part of the economy. What didn't we cover that maybe we should have talked about?
Wow, Rich, that's a great question.
Within the next 3 hours.
Yeah, that's right. How much time do I have to unpack that one? No, it's look, I think we've covered a lot here today, Rich. I think that there is an opportunity for us to collaborate. I think more as healthcare cyber experts, as we talked about. I do think there's a place, and we got to figure out how to do it and I know there's lots of folks on the Hill thinking about it, to help fund cybersecurity at the federal level that's actually going to drive and reduce risk. That's key, right? And I think, the administrations, both past and present, have been thinking about this. But look, I think this is the future of our society. It's not going anywhere. And the last comment I would make that you barely touched on is, look, there's 3.5 million cybersecurity jobs open in the world today. We got to start educating our youth. We've got to start educating. I'm working with a number of colleges to put certificate programs in place, because this isn't going to go anywhere, Rich. And we've got to start making sure that in the early years, we're equipping our people at the personal level to protect themselves, but also investing in the future of our country by allowing individuals to learn about cybersecurity and become experts.
Dan, that is a great wrap up, a great summation that, look, we need to have better policy and better coordination from our government. That's their job. And also that our education system needs to be educating our young people, because these are the jobs of the future. And I would suspect we could build a curriculum at the high school level. And if you want to do that, I happen to have one that I work with quite closely, and I'd like to see some champion cybersecurity people.
So, Rich, I gotta add one thing to that. We'll talk about that for sure. But the other thing that's really important, and I've talked to a number of universities. You mentioned the SMU Advisory Board, but also the speed to which cybersecurity is changing is faster than the way that the educational system can evolve. So it's this cultural problem within the educational system, because if we don't allow the curriculum to evolve, certainly on an annual basis, it becomes challenging. And then the accreditation and all the things. So it's a complicated, opportunity for us as a country.
Absolutely. And we've talked about education. We've got some guests coming up. But that model of someone's going to go away to 4 years of college and come out and be ready to work, it's bypassed them. And I can tell you that in my career as a young computer programmer, there wasn't a college curriculum to go to. I had to learn it on the job, and grateful for the people that provided me those opportunities. Dan, this has been fantastic today. Any closing thoughts for our audience?
No, I would just like to, you mentioned the pandemic at the beginning. I hadn't had a chance to mention that. We've had the honor to work with lots of healthcare organizations. Those organizations have been through a lot. They've protected our communities. So thank you to all of the heroes of healthcare and the cyber healthcare experts out there as well. So really appreciate it and humbled to be part of the community. So thank you.
So very, very poignant comment, and one that everyone should embrace. Brian Peters was our most recent guest, and we concluded with, hug a healthcare worker after you've had your vaccine. We've been talking today with the Chief Executive Officer of Fortified Health Security, Dan Dodson, about cybercrime, cyber attacks, cybersecurity around the globe, within businesses, individuals, and within the healthcare community. Please subscribe and rate us high if you would, please, on your favorite podcast channel: Amazon, Apple, Buzzsprout, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or at YouTube TV, Richard Helppie's Common Bridge. And of course, register for free at richardhelppie.com. This is Rich Helppie with our guest, Dan Dodson, signing off on the Common Bridge.
Thank you for watching Richard Helppie's Common Bridge. Please click the subscribe button below. Also, tune into our podcast, Richard Helppie's Common Bridge, on Apple, iHeart, Amazon, and others. Also, be sure to visit us online at richardhelppie.com.